And I would now like to present or introduce Mac Hickley. He's a project coordinator with Alberta Environment and Parks. Mac has been with the government of Alberta for 5 years. First with the Land Use Secretariat, then working on consultation policies with Indigenous relations, and now delivering a watershed resiliency program. He previously led a watershed group in Calgary, advising City Council, advocating for rivers, creeks, and wetlands, and working to enhance public awareness. Mac is also currently a member of APPI Council. Mac's presentation will introduce integrated watershed approaches, collaborative community action, long-term resiliency, conservation, restoration, enhancement, and stewardship. He will also discuss how watershed resiliency program, how it has been developed. So it's a riparian setback calculator, as mentioned by Judy, for municipalities to use. And this is especially applicable in rural and remote areas in Alberta. So please join me in welcoming Mac, and then just a note that following Mac's presentation, we will have a short question and answer period for both Mac and Judy. Thank you.
Switch up to yours real quick. Okay, thank you everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to see all these interested planners in riparian areas and the ways that we can go about protecting them. I am a project coordinator with the Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program based in Calgary, and I'm going to talk to you a bit today about some of the work that the WRRP has done and is doing for helping municipalities to build long-term natural watershed resiliency. The government has a multi-pronged approach to flood and drought mitigation. I'm going to go through a little bit of what the government of Alberta is doing, has been doing, and I'm going to talk a bit about the importance of riparian areas and hopefully not overlap too much with what Judy talked about, but get some of that emphasize some more. I'm going to show you some examples of projects that the WRRP has funded in order to help build some of this natural resiliency to flood and drought. And I'm going to introduce you to a project that is under development now to help municipalities implement stepping back from the water. The multifaceted approach that the government's taking, has been taking since the 2013 flood, includes management techniques for reservoir storage and new additional stormwater detention facilities, where we've been building flood warning systems and emergency preparation and response abilities. And we have 2 ongoing grant programs, the ACRP, Alberta Community Resilience Program for large-scale gray infrastructure protection, and the WRRP, the Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program for watershed groups and municipalities for softer natural infrastructure. This approach, this 4-piece approach, was profoundly influenced by the 2013 flood, and also includes expanded floodplain mapping, restoration of fish habitat in impacted areas, and the rehabilitation of recreation trails in the backcountry. So the WRRP was established in 2014 after the flood to support local efforts, mainly in high priority watersheds that are highly prone to flood and drought impacts, and focusing on the key functions of riparian areas: water quality, flood water conveyance, bank stabilization, habitat and biodiversity, and some socioeconomic benefits. Now, part of this has been talked about by Judy a lot in setbacks and the stepping back from the water document that came out in 2012 and then was largely forgotten or left behind after the flood and the emergency response efforts. So the not less than 6 meters provision for environmental reserve in the MGA has been a central piece of putting the stepping back toolkit that I'll be talking about today together. There recently was a report from the Insurance Bureau of Canada that talked about the rising costs of flood events in Canada. And I'll just give you a stat from that from between 1983 and 2008, the average annual loss for floods and the associated costs was $405 million a year. Between 2009 and 17, it was $1.8 billion annually. So for the first 25 years of that period, 83 to 08, just over $10 billion was the insurance cost. For the next 8 years, between 09 and 17, it was $14.5 billion. And there's no sign that this is going to drop back down again. So my point there being that efforts by municipal governments to limit flood risk are consistent with their purposes under the MGA, some of those being to provide good government and to develop safe and viable communities. And as Judy noted earlier in her presentation, viable meaning economically stable. So a quote from this Insurance Bureau of Canada report says that the most cost-effective means to mitigate flood losses naturally with natural infrastructure are to conserve what exists naturally, to restore what's been damaged, and to replace some of the losses or some of the features that have been lost due to natural or human-made causes. And those are the 3 areas of focus for the Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program. Here's a picture from the Western Sky Land Trust of Legacy Island downstream of Calgary. This was a shot taken in 2012, in the fall of 2012, before the flood, to showcase the vibrancy and the vibrancy of floodplains and riparian areas. So that's the fall before the flood. This was during the peak of the flood. The island was submerged. 5 days later, the floodwaters are receding, and you can see a lot of sediment and silt built up on the island. Within a few weeks, the floodwaters had returned largely to normal, except for a lot of the sediment that was remaining on the island. And a year after the first photo, the island is still largely intact. The vegetation is returning, and a few pictures in the year before that, there was a little white building on the far bank that didn't stay there during the flood, and if there had been more development in that floodplain, it would have been severely damaged or lost. But the natural vegetation survived in large part. That's conservation. For restoration, here's an example just upstream of Cochrane on Jumping Pound Creek, where the flood of 2013 washed away some of the bank. You can see there was some willows planted, and over the course of about 2 months between the left and the right picture there, the shoots have already started producing leaves and plants. And that pathway along the riverbank is probably occupying, it's hard to tell the scale exactly, but certainly most of 6 meters. To replace some of the watershed features that have been lost due to urban development, the Alberta Low Impact Development Partnership has been doing a project in Calgary and Edmonton in communities. They've been building community demonstration hubs where they collect stormwater from parking lots and roads and such. And they have monitoring sensors, and it's designed to collect stormwater and build community awareness of some of the functions that are being replaced in urban areas. Sorry. This is also in Calgary, upstream of some of the farthest upstream Calgary residential developments in Griffith Woods Park. This is a pond leveler being installed where beavers are in abundance, and this leveler, this pipe goes on top of the beaver dam, and the beavers can just build more stuff on top of the pipe without realizing that the pipe funnels water out of the wetland downstream, and it maintains a constant water level without the beavers realizing it. And these devices have been installed in lots of communities in Alberta, more in rural areas, but this is an effective way to live with our neighboring species. In the rural areas, we've funded a lot of agricultural projects where there's been some fencing placed along streams and wetlands to keep livestock from entering the rivers or entering the water bodies for water, and some solar-powered off-stream watering troughs. And it's been found that 8 times out of 10, livestock will prefer to drink out of those troughs rather than walk into the river or stream directly. In Okotoks, we've funded a project, or co-funded a project, a research facility where there's a number of plots that are being studied by University of Calgary students and professors, where they isolate various pollutants and contaminants and water levels and study the effects of flooding. And Calgary, that's an image, it's an illustration of a project that's underway downstream of Englewood, where there was some significant damage from 2013. And it shows a sort of multifaceted approach to public awareness and restoration. They have riverbank restoration, they have recreational pathways and benches and interpretive signs, biodiversity enhancements, river access for recreationalists. And that's an ongoing project in Calgary. Other projects apart from the grants that WRRP has funded include maps. We developed maps for high priority watersheds that are prone to flooding and drought. We did a survey of municipalities in 2016 to find out what they knew about watershed resiliency and stepping back from the water. And that was targeted to municipalities in the high priority watersheds that were identified in the maps. And now we're working on a toolkit to help implement stepping back from the water and to target some of the needs that were identified in the survey. It's also of note in the South Saskatchewan region that the SSRP, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, includes a strategy to implement or to encourage the implementation of stepping back from the water. So there's the document. We did a survey. We found that to the question, have you ever used stepping back from the water to inform development decisions? 23% of those responding said yes, they had. 35% said no, and 42% didn't know if they had used it or not. And of those people who didn't use it, the most common reason was that they didn't know it existed. One of the questions we asked was about the adequacy of your knowledge of riparian values. And you can see the green area is somewhat or completely adequate knowledge, and the red and pink is completely or somewhat inadequate. And it's apparent that there's a fairly high confidence level of people understanding riparian values, and the slightly higher levels or higher areas where people didn't understand were in recreation and economic development, the sort of social, softer scientific benefits of riparian areas. Another question was, what aspects of riparian management would you like to know more about? And by far the most popular response was they'd like clearer direction from the province. And a number of responses identified best practices and other resources to help them identify opportunities to conserve and restore areas in their municipalities. So how can we do it? How can we protect our water bodies and municipalities? We're developing a stepping back from the water toolkit now with two key components. The first one is a set of model policies and bylaws, so templates for municipalities to use to tailor for their own contexts and situations and adopt, and a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that translates the information that was in stepping back from the water and calculates a setback for any type of water body that you might come across, or most types of water bodies that you might come across. There'll also be a user guide to help run through these pieces of the toolkit. So, for example, this is what a riparian setback policy might look like on the books when a municipality adopts it. You can put the municipality's name in and their numbers and special notes as appropriate. And it's important that, like all municipal bylaws, they have to be drafted with legal counsel, expert legal counsel, and adequate resources are needed to monitor the compliance and enforce where necessary. In the toolkit, as it's developed so far, we have templates for cosmetic lawn fertilizers, unauthorized use of reserve lands, removal of riparian vegetation on private lands, management of lands adjacent to water bodies, a natural area land use district, and other land use provisions or land use bylaw provisions for riparian setbacks. This is what a policy would look like or could look like, where there's a number of whereas statements, whereas this and this and this. We now hereby adopt a policy to protect riparian areas in our municipality. There's also a model riparian setback overlay for the land use bylaw. So as we've seen with Judy, there's a step-by-step approach listed in Stepping Back from the Water with recommendations and detailed diagrams and tables. This delineation of setbacks, like the legal counsel for policies, setbacks need to be delineated by people qualified to make these assessments on a case-by-case basis as necessary. Any of the steps, defining the scenario or summarizing the key information or vegetative filter strips, any of these steps may require input by biologists or hydrologists or geologists or surveyors, and may also require field data. So it's not necessarily a desktop exercise. This shows one of the figures in Stepping Back and some of the features of riparian areas and how they interact with water bodies. Here's another one where it's clear that, and Judy described it, actual setback widths depend on local conditions. And that's what the Riparian Setback Calculator spreadsheet looks like as an Excel file. So the setback factors, as defined in Stepping Back, are on the left, and a little description of the parameters are on the right, and the boxes in red in the middle are where you plug in numbers. Water body type can often be determined from Google Maps or Google Earth, and sometimes it's not clear, but most times it usually is. Substrate, the soil characteristics, slope profiles, shallow groundwater, fish-bearing status, floodplains, and whether or not there's an active channel. I'd like to take you through a demonstration based on a hypothetical case that I did as a desktop exercise with the data sources that are listed in Stepping Back from the Water and links to those publicly available sites. And for my demonstration, I picked a place called DeWitt's Pond. It's west of Airdrie. It's fairly well known in angling circles. It has a small cluster of houses developed next to it historically that go back years and years. I'm personally moderately familiar with it myself. My mom used to live in one of those houses. So I'm not a fisherman, but I knew the area, and I knew it wasn't at risk really of development pressure that I knew of. It's surrounded by agricultural uses, and it was just a test case that I wanted to see how this calculator worked. So there's Government of Canada information on topography and in some cases substrate. So in this case I got some You can see the pond is outlined in blue, and the elevation levels are shown on the map. The day I chose to look at the database from Government of Alberta, the geological survey data was unavailable. They were working on the website, but some of that soil characteristic information is available too if you can find it. There's a Alberta water well database that you can access, and in this case, there's DeWitt's Pond again, with a couple of water wells nearby that are listed on the website. They're unfortunately too far away from DeWitt's Pond to apply to the setback calculator. They're more than 50 meters away, and in some cases, the water information, the depth of water is unavailable if they're old records. But most of these information sources can be augmented by the municipality in question. They probably have a history of other applications or information about any water body in their district, in their jurisdiction, that isn't on the provincial or federal websites. And so local information is invaluable to filling in these kinds of information gaps. Is it fish bearing? Well, there's the Fish and Wildlife mapping tool that indicates there's a little fish icon on that pond, and yes, it is. It's actually stocked annually by the Alberta government as a recreational resource for anglers and fishermen. And so for the purpose of setbacks and whether it's fish bearing or not, that counts as a fish bearing water body. The flood mapping has been done for Nose Creek through Airdrie, but not for DeWitt's Pond. So the nearest actual flood, existing 1 in 100-year flood hazard mapping is not appropriate for DeWitt's Pond, or isn't available, rather. And so I had to skip to the next one. And is there a meander belt? Well, stepping back shows what a meander belt is, and DeWitt's Pond obviously doesn't have an active channel. It's just a pond, so that also doesn't apply to this one. Meander belts are really for medium-sized and smaller watercourses with moving channels. And setback distances, there's a formula for figuring out setbacks relative to a meander belt, and they are measured from the edge of the meander belt rather than from the legal bank, as in other water bodies. So let's see what happens when we plug in some numbers on this DeWitt's Pond case. The first box has a drop-down menu for what type of water body is it. It's a permanent, or it's a temporary ephemeral water body, or a non-permanent wetland. And depending on what type you fill in, the setback distance at the bottom will be different. So for a permanent water body, it starts out at 20 meters. For substrate, I took a shot and said, well, how far out from the bank do we go with alluvial sediments underground? And I said, well, it's a pretty defined water body. I'll say 2 meters. Why not say 2 meters? That bumps the final setback up by 1.2. Slope I got from the elevation lines. I calculated roughly from the government's website, the federal government's website, that there's about 8% slope nearby the edge of the pond. That kicks up the setback another few meters. Steep slopes, it says enter the total length in meters of slopes exceeding 25% that start within 50 meters. So within 50 meters of the bank, are there any steep slopes? And if there are, how long are those slopes? How far are they? Enter that in meters. In this case, there are no steep slopes. Shallow groundwater, enter the total width in meters of areas with groundwater shallower than 1.8 meters, starting within 50 meters. So again, you go out as far as 50 meters from the bank, and how far out does the shallow groundwater go before it gets more than 1.8 meters deep? I took another guess, well, say 5 meters, see what happens. 5 meters, it kicked up another 5 meters to the setback distance. Fish bearing status, drop down menu, yes or no. That didn't change the setback distance. Floodplains, I didn't have any information on that, but let's say that if I don't know an answer to these questions, I can't justifiably insert something hypothetically or at random. So I would have to say 0 if I didn't know or if there was no information available. But in this case, I just tried it. Let's see what happens if I put 5 in. Well, nothing changed. For the floodplain factor, it would have to be over 30.52 for this to change. It's just a straight parameter that changes by the number of meters of the floodplain. And in this case, there's no active channel or meander belt, so that was 0 too. So there we have a DeWitt's Pond case of 30 and a half meters setback based on this calculator tool. I didn't do field investigations for this. I didn't confer with technical experts very much. And before any of you or a municipality can settle on a legally and scientifically defensible setback distance, you'd have to go through a number of factors. You'd have to make sure that these numbers are ground truthed, and you'd have to look at the higher level legislation where it's applicable, Public Lands Act, Fisheries Act, Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act if necessary, Species at Risk Act, and anything else on the municipal bylaws level. And then the setback will have to be surveyed and mapped, and then the water body can be protected with the policies that the municipality has already adopted. This has been my presentation. I have been intending to bring this forward for a while now. It's still under review internally, and I'm looking for really giving some information and tools to help municipalities protect water bodies. It's not always easy for the rural or farther out from major centers municipalities to do with this kind of work because they have fewer planners on staff and they have fewer resources available to them than a big city like Calgary or Edmonton has. So I'm looking to give some information and help protect riparian areas because they need to be protected for good government and for viable communities. We have examples where other kinds of approaches can be implemented. They're valuable across, or they're applicable across the province. And so for that, I'm looking now to, sorry. I'm looking now to, how do I get this back? It's back. It's not on my screen. Pilot this with a couple of municipalities if I can. If anybody here is interested in working with me for a test of these municipal policies or the setback calculator, I'd be delighted to talk to you later at the conference or here, or contact me by email. The Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program can fund a few more projects. We're a limited program. We have 2 years left of funding, and the deadline for the next round is the end of October. And it's oversubscribed every year. We have a $32 million total program over the past 7 years, or past 5 and next 2 years, and we've already received requests for $63 million. And municipalities have the ability. We are developing tools to help, and it's listed in regional plans as a strategy to implement stepping back from the water. And so I'm looking for volunteer municipalities to work with over the next few months to see what we can do about implementing some of these tools. Thank you. So I hope I've left enough time for questions from me and Judy. Thank you.
I'll just make an announcement. So for questions, we invite anyone and everyone to ask any questions you may have to Mac and or Judy. When you do ask your question, we're just asking that you stand and introduce yourself, and I will be running around with a microphone so that the rest of the room can hear, and we of course are live streaming so that the live stream can pick up your question as well.
first hand I see.
Thanks, Matt. That was great. Or Max, sorry. Is there a website where you've got that spreadsheet or access database or whatever that was for filling in to do the toolkit that we can use now? I know it's in progress, but something that we could at least play with.
There is not a website where it's available yet. It's under development. It's under internal review by a cross-ministry advisory team, and it's not approved yet for release. But if you have an interest in working with me, I can share it with you, and we'll go through it on an individual municipality basis.
My name is Atta Mohammed. I work for Leduc County. We have a few lakes like Wizard Lake, Pigeon Lake, Telford Lake. My question is that with regards to implementation of this, one is the legal side, because you can't just guess on numbers and ask a private landowner that we need 30-meter setbacks from a development. That's very hard, like until you have all these technical details and they are being provided by a professional. Second is that whether the Alberta environment, which is a province, municipality might not have those resources, so they can at least map out the big lakes in Alberta and say that these are the setbacks you guys need to follow. Thanks.
Well, for the legal aspect, stepping back from the water itself is a guideline document. It's voluntary for municipalities. It's not a requirement it's not a policy, or it's not a piece of legislation as defined by the government. So the stepping back calculator and the toolkit are also voluntary, and the municipal jurisdiction comes in when you or some other municipality adopts a policy on your own books, whether it's the land use bylaw or some other policy that you enact, then that gives you a legal basis to enforce these kinds of setbacks.
Rick Stukenberg, Town of Stony Plain. So we're a member of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region, and we have requirements to change our MDP to focus on areas such as density, intensification, and protection of the environment. So listening to both your presentations, what advice and recommendations can you give to provide incentives for industry to do the planning that protects the environment and the landscape? Thank you.
You want to take that one? I mean, I mentioned an Insurance Bureau report of Canada that went over some of those costs. So in a lot of cases, the development proposals that come forward do a cost-benefit analysis, and I don't think I speak for the government exactly, but the time scale of those benefit analysis may not account for the time frame of natural disasters that the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and the insurance companies are on top of this probably more than anyone. They're watching the trends, and whether it's climate or development patterns. And intensification is great, and protection of environmental features is great. You have to balance the political will and how long it's going to take for the costs to pay off. Judy, you want to?
I would say ditto. I went around with Jubilee Insurance Company a few years ago to all the rural municipalities in Alberta, talking about insurance implications for flood, drought, and wildfire. Talking to municipalities about things they could do using the tools they already had in the Municipal Government Act and other pieces of legislation to do more active management and control within their municipalities and how they could avoid liability. We talked at length Jubilee has a number of workshops they put on with this very question in mind. So if you're interested in learning how these the work that you do to actively plan for and create these vegetative filter strips, how this would improve your insurance coverage, I would suggest you go and talk directly to your insurance company, because they are looking for innovations. They're looking for people who are going to set the next level of standards and best management practices. And I think you'd go a long way to improving your liability if you create these vegetative filter strips and do your best to protect your community from flooding and drought.
Khalid Mohammed, Town of High River. Thank you for the presentation, Judy and Mark. Timeline. I think Jody had mentioned earlier that, you know, municipal, federal, provincial governments are always slow in their interactions and in their work and whatnot. So the flood mapping that the province is working on, we have no idea when it will be released. But this toolkit, you said it's under review and it still is internal document and whatnot. When can we expect a final document? Thanks.
When can we? I'm hoping this toolkit can be available soon. It's got some legal and formatting issues that may have to be developed internally yet, but it's also waiting on some test cases. I need to test it in a couple of municipalities to see if it's really going to be useful and if we can tweak it a little bit here or there before it gets released publicly. I don't know exactly a timeline, and I also can't speak for the flood hazard mapping section either. That's not my division, but they're working hard. I know they are. I've talked to them.
Just to add to that all of the policies that MAC is referencing and bylaws are samples that come from Alberta. They already exist. So a municipal government somewhere in Alberta has created that sample bylaw. So they've had a legal review in their own jurisdiction, and these are just given to you as samples of what you can do for policy and bylaw. Land use bylaws have to arise necessarily from your MDP and your area structure plans and your own policies in every community. So that's a place where you can all start looking, is how does your municipal development plan reflect the new purpose of municipal government, which is to foster the well-being of the environment. We didn't even talk about that. There's also a new provision in the amendments that require that when you're preparing an intermunicipal development plan, that now you must address environmental issues that cross your boundaries, that affect each of you in that IDP area. So there's different things that allow you to be a bit more creative, working towards that new purpose, creating a tax base specifically for that purpose. There already are countless municipalities, for example, who have put in a funding mechanism in their water utility bills, whereby they ask every single resident taxpayer to provide $5 to $10, $15, $20 a month, okay, for storm drainage management systems. A lot of what we're talking about is storm drainage management. So in order to create and protect and manage those vegetative filter strips, you can be looking at these as storm drainage management facilities. Just because they're natural doesn't mean they're not facilities. That may be where you want to invest your storm drainage management dollars. That's just sort of some of the things that are already there. You don't even have to go as far as stepping back right now. That's a tool that's coming. It's going to be for you based on the gaps of information and what you said were barriers to being able to implement this guidance tool. But you don't have to wait. Why wait for spring? Why not just do it now? You already have that authority. Sorry, Mac.
No, go ahead.
But that's...
Thank you very much. My name is Dave McCrae. I'm with ISL Engineering in Grand Prairie. Question, I guess, probably to Judy. When you showed the slide with the 4 examples of what is a water body or a water course and what isn't, and A and D weren't, so on. But you made reference to one is a natural fen or a wetland, and it got me thinking about the relationship between the Act and the new requirements for ER, but how that cross-references to the wetland policy. Because the wetland policy arguably has, in some ways, more legislative clout than the MGA does with regard to ER. So I was wondering if you could just comment a little bit on that between the relationship of the wetland policy and how it relates to this whole matter.
Okay, so you're talking about some of the conflicts that you perceive between municipal planning and implementation of the Alberta wetland policy. So, first of all, the Alberta wetland policy never even kicks in, doesn't even apply, unless somebody applies to the director under the Water Act to disturb a wetland. That is when that's when that policy and the classification system and all the other tools and mechanisms, including the accreditation of the QUISPs. I love those QUISPs. Anyway, that's when it applies. But before that, it doesn't apply to private lands anywhere or to the settled area because nobody has made an application. So the way the Alberta wetland policy has been set up is that a whole bunch of work happens before the Alberta wetland policy ever kicks in. And there's an assumption made that this is happening in the planning stage by municipal councils. So if your municipal bylaw, your land use bylaw or other bylaw or policy are clearly indicating that there should be no development in wetlands, or that riparian lands need to have appropriate setbacks delineated, etc., then that is the first consideration for the land developer. They have to look at what's in your local tools. Once they've made some kind of request to develop those lands at the municipal level, because sometimes provincial directors and different staff are brought into those discussions as well, then an application goes on. So does a developer always have to work with his municipality first? Well, it's not mandatory. There's nothing mandated that a land developer has to do this pre-work before making the application to the government to disturb the wetland. So you may have a case where the land developer goes directly under the Alberta wetland policy to get an approval. What my experience has been right now is that those applications are not deemed to be complete. They're not complete. So the developer is sent back to do that pre-assessment work, that work with the municipal councils, etc. So how do you want to play it? Do you want to leave it just in the hands of the director under the Water Act? Or do you want to make sure that that particular wetland in your community has all these management policies in place and land use bylaw provisions in place, municipal development plan, area structure plan considerations in place? So I would say be proactive so that the government will send those applications back and you won't end up with an approval to disturb a wetland where you have never been part of the planning process. Does that help? So don't worry about that wetland policy. I would say leave that to the scientists. Worry about yourself.
My name is Jordan Rug. I'm from Smoky Lake County. I have a question for Judy. It's a legal question about accreted land next to a water body. So Section 89 of the Land Titles Act indicates that the property owner or the Crown can make an application to have the legal description of lands adjacent to a lake, in this case, changed to reflect that change in accretion. We're kind of embroiled in a friendly discussion at this point with the province. The land hasn't been resurveyed, so the top of bank hasn't changed, but the province is telling us that that is our land, regardless of the fact that we haven't applied to have that land consolidated into the title. I'd just like your best legal opinion on whether that is legal or or if they do have to make application and have the lands resurveyed. Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I have to do is ask Mac what your question was. I'm very, very deaf, and I wear a hearing aid, so I heard a lot of words, but I couldn't differentiate between them all. So I'm going to turn to Mac and ask, what was the legal question, okay? And then I may or may not be able to answer it here, because any legal opinion, any legal answer, always depends on facts. It always depends on all kinds of things that we need to consider before we can say, well, this is how the law would apply. So I'm going to turn to Mac now and say, what was the legal question, Mac?
Hopefully I'll get it right. So there's some accreted land,
Okay.
and it was asked. Yeah. Who owns it?
Oh. Okay. Okay, accretion. Accretion is it's a common law concept, okay? And the province of Alberta has not done anything to interfere with riparian landowner rights. So there is a time period, though, and there's a time period involved. It depends on what lands have accreted under what circumstances. But if you are a landowner who lives next to a water body, and over consider maybe 5-10 years, you now have all this exposed shoreline that you are expected to manage and take care of. You can apply to the government. It's a very simple application form, and ask that that accreted land now is included in your title. Okay? You can ask for that. But then, if we have several years of high precipitation events, the water levels might come up again, and that accreted land may now be covered with water, and then there's a presumption that those lands, that bed and shore, is owned by the province. I don't think they deny very many applications for accreted land when it's been 10 years where a rancher or farmer or just landowner has had to deal with access issues and other problems associated with that accreted shoreline. It works both ways, though, because once the land is recovered with water, then the province can claim the bed and shore again. If you have a survey stake, so if you are in a subdivision where there's survey stakes, unfortunately, you cannot claim accreted land beyond your survey stake. And that's just how it goes. Because surveyed land has a definite boundary. It's only if you have an unarticulated boundary, such as you own the title to all the lands that are exposed, or to the bed and shore or the legal bank of such and such a lake, that you can apply to become the owner of accreted lands. So if you're in a subdivision and you see the shoreline going out, don't even bother applying. You already have a definite boundary. In that case, though, and the municipality has taken, we don't take land in Alberta, has required the dedication of environmental reserve, and now the environmental reserve is exposed to a much greater extent. The municipality can apply to the provincial government and ask that that accreted land become part of the municipal environmental reserve parcel. And it happens all the time. In fact, I know of at least 2 cases where the province of Alberta has asked the municipality to take over ownership of that land, and you know why? It's to control access, so that somebody's managing it. Because as soon as there's that situation, citizens believe it's public land and it's a free-for-all. Nobody's regulating and controlling human access. So, long-winded answer, but it does depend on the facts, it depends on time periods, it depends on the actual lake, the history, what your land title actually says. It's quite complex. Hopefully that answered it, not sure.
Hi, my name is Imran Ahmed. I'm manager of development services with City of Medicine Hat. I'm an engineer by profession. I really like Jody's comments about engineers, and I echo with you. My question is with Mac. Again, the numbers, engineer with numbers. First of all, I would like to know, how did you determine these setbacks in your tool? Like, did you do some kind of modeling, or what did you do different than what was happening before?
The algorithms behind the setback calculator come directly from stepping back from the water, the document. So what those tables and charts in stepping back from the water show for vegetated filter strips and alluvium distances and all those things have numbers associated with them, and those are what went into the calculator spreadsheet. So it's not anything different from what's already published in the guidebook. It's just put into a spreadsheet so you can plug in some numbers and come up with a final calculation.
Hey, Evan Goldstrom with Cleaney Consulting. For the setback calculator, I'm wondering, is there a maximum size for a body of water that you recommend using? I'm thinking with conditions changing around the body of water, or is it just simply a matter of kind of parceling it out based on those changing conditions?
One of the early pieces of feedback I've heard is that it's more useful for small developments, lot or a few lots size kind of thing. Once you get into an area structure plan size or a larger development along a water body, you have to do a lot more in-depth environmental studies anyway, and so you might not find the benefit of the calculator. But and in some cases, like the meander belt, it's aimed at medium size or smaller active channel streams. And so if you have a huge or a big river with a huge floodplain, that setback distance could become monstrous too. And so it's based on a context-specific sort of approach, and you have to take it case by case. More?
I don't have any comments to
Okay.
Hey guys, it's Marcus Honey with the Town of Canmore. A few questions, I guess. A twofold question regarding everyone's favorite topic, environmental reserves. I know, Judy, you're kind of cringing there. So I guess the first thing is, can you just clarify, because I think there's some, I guess, misunderstanding between environmental reserves and environmental significant areas. Can you just specify between the two, because often there is that debate, and I just want to make sure everyone kind of leaves here understanding the difference.
Okay. Difference between environmental reserves and bioreserves?
Environmental reserves. And what was the question again?
Essentially the difference between environmental reserves and like an ESA.
Areas.
I'm sorry?
ESAs.
Oh. Environmentally significant areas are landscape features that have been identified by scientists, and there is a document called Environmentally Significant Areas of Alberta. This has been created and based on scientists who went out and used several criteria to establish which landscapes in Alberta were considered environmentally significant or sensitive areas. So there's a map of those. Coincidentally, most of the riparian landscapes associated with moving bodies of water have been included in the ESA maps. So ESA maps already exist, so you just go to them on the website, pull them up for your particular water body in your community. So those are established. There is nothing in law that says that you must protect environmentally significant areas. There are land use policies that exist. These were created in 1996, just after the MGA came out as a revised document. And these Alberta land use policies are still in place, and they encourage municipalities to protect environmentally significant areas. Under the regional land use plans, such as the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, municipalities are now expected to protect environmentally significant areas. So the language has changed a bit in the South Saskatchewan region. Under the LARP, there isn't that much change. And if you don't have a regional plan in place, the old encouraging land use policies apply. So that's ESA. Environmental reserves are completely different. These are creatures that are created by under the MGA. They're statutory creatures, okay? They don't exist, they're not even logical. They only exist for the purpose of determining which lands may provide development constraints or have create a problem for land developers who want to put buildings in certain locations. So, and they only come into play during subdivision applications. So during an application for subdivision, based on municipal development plans, intermunicipal development plans, area structure plans, etc., and the land use bylaw, planners work with the land developer and identify certain lands that have been described under Section 664 and say, when the land subdivides, we are going to require you, land developer, to dedicate these lands as environmental reserves. They then are owned by the municipality in perpetuity. Municipal government actually owns the title. So municipalities, in theory, are supposed to control access, manage, and conserve these lands, but in practice, they're often seen as throwaway lands, and nobody does anything with them. People go out and plant all kinds of ornamentals. People sometimes mow the grasses and demand that operation staff come and mow the grasses. They're not, there's an overlap. There's a coincidental overlap between riparian landscapes associated with moving water bodies and ESA, but they're not the same. Okay, so if you want to know what an ESA is, go and look. There's maps, and there'll be one for your community. They exist all over the province of Alberta.
No, that was great. I just wanted everyone else to leave with that information because often that is a confusion. That said, though, too, could you maybe just speak quickly about environmental conservation easements with respect to ESAs?
Okay. Now there you just made a huge error. They're not environmental, okay? They're conservation easements. And in fact, if you try and take an environmental reserve as a conservation easement, it's not going to work. Yeah. Conservation easements are landscapes that a municipal council, i.e. their administration, consider so valuable for the overall greater public interest that they're willing to buy those lands for conservation purposes. And they're not environmental reserves. They cannot be the same landscape features that you could require to be dedicated as environmental reserves. Conservation reserves must be purchased. So if you put that, for example, here's a good example, Nose Creek Park in Calgary. Nose Creek Park in Calgary, the city of Calgary tried to claim that land as an environmental reserve and say it has to remain the way it is forever and ever, amen. And the court said, no, if you want to preserve that land in the overall greater public interest, you're going to have to buy it. And so they had to, they did, they bought that land. That, under our new legislation, could have been purchased very legally during the subdivision of that area as a conservation reserve. So the problem is, who has sufficient financial resources to purchase a conservation easement? Okay? Conservation and what you can take a conservation reserve, because that is a taking with compensation, it's all laid out. What you can actually, what kind of lands you can take and how you go about negotiating for the sale of those lands. You have to pay market value. So they're new. And again, what you should know is this is a statutory creature, all right? They're brand new. It's a brand new creation by the provincial government of a new mechanism that municipalities can use to ensure that maybe large tracts of land are preserved for the future. Was that too long-winded?
Okay.
All right.
That was great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Well, don't ever get a lawyer going on the law. We love to talk about the law, and we can bore anybody. That's why I said I don't want to bore you to death with legal mumbling.
Thank you, Judy and Mac. That was excellent. And thank you to the audience for the questions. And I think now we'll just conclude the session. And I believe that it's lunchtime. So.
So just so everyone's aware, there's a buffet lunch. Serve yourself and come have a seat.
Start ready to go. Is it just on? I'll get people to move up. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Robert is still in the process of getting his presentation set up. It'll take about another 2 minutes. But I'd like to take that time to, one, welcome you to the session, and also to please encourage you to move a little closer, if that's doable.
Don't be afraid.
And as you are moving forward and getting settled, my name is Gary Wilson, and I'm going to be moderating this session. And given the amount of organization that Robert's already done on his presentation, I've got very little to contribute other than to run around with the microphone towards the end of the session. I did want to give a very general introduction to Robert. He's now with the City of Edmonton and has been the last 2 years. Before that, he was in Auckland, New Zealand for 5 to 6 years. But he's going to provide much more detail about what his experiences are and the experiences that he brings to this presentation. Just very quickly, though, I do want to acknowledge the fact that we are on Treaty 7 lands, and also our closest neighbors of the treaty are the Stoney Nakoda, just to the north, and we're also in the Métis Nation Section 3, and do want to acknowledge the cultural and territorial lands. And interestingly, that point about recognizing the lands is something that's done much more rigidly and with greater discipline in New Zealand than what we're doing here. We tend to provide more of a collective recognition of the lands on a conference-wide basis, but Robert was suggesting that we also do that on a local session basis, and happy to do so. Quick housekeeping rules. If the bells ring to evacuate the building, there is an exit just out the door to the left. And washrooms are still where they were in the morning. Just go out and go to the right, and they're down at the end of the hall. And Robert's comfortable with you coming and going, provided you don't slam the door going or arriving. And other than that, it's going to be a combination of a presentation and also a workshop. And with that, I would like to introduce Robert so he can further introduce himself to begin.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Gary, thank you so much for doing that. I was just pointing out the fact that I worked in New Zealand for 10 years, actually, at Auckland City Council. And every meeting we had, like, obviously not every meeting, but, special meetings like these or workshops that we always acknowledge the local Māori tribes, iwi, in New Zealand. So it's good to see that we're doing this in Canada now, because I was away from Canada for a very long time. And so I wanted just to ask Gary, because I don't know the tribes in this area, because I am from Toronto. So originally. Anyway, thank you for doing that, Gary. I really appreciate it. And yeah, like Gary said, I want to make this fun, all right? I want to make this a fun session. I'm going to talk a bit, because I love to talk. For those of the people here at City of Edmonton that have seen my presentations, I go on for hours. So I definitely need somebody to say, hey, like Gary, say you're running out of time, because I'll need that, I know. But I also wanted to do the workshop. So I wanted to have that opportunity. So that's why, Gary, if you can shut me down after an hour, because we're going to need some time to do the workshop for sure. So, yes, awesome. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about smooth moving for all ages and abilities. Just wanted to give some shout outs and thanks to a lot of the City of Edmonton staff who are listed here, Deanna O'Donoghue, Heather Crow, and Yogi Subramanian for helping me out. Deanna was supposed to come with me to do this presentation, but unfortunately she had another conference to go to. I'm coming along obviously here to do this. And thanks to all of you for coming to the session. I'm really excited to see so many people here. So I hope you're going to enjoy it, and I hope you're going to learn something. That's the key thing. A bit about me first. Currently, I'm the acting senior urban designer with the urban design unit at the City of Edmonton. So I get involved on, like right here, the two UDs. So urban design, obviously that's supposed to be my main role. I'm supposed to be an urban designer, but I'm focusing a lot on universal design because I have a lot of passion for it, which you will see in this presentation. And also I think it's really important in Edmonton. Previous to that, as Gary alluded to, I used to work for Auckland Transport. Believe it or not, I used to work for a transport agency. And when Auckland amalgamated from originally 7 separate cities into one big one, I was the only urban designer for the entire region for about 1.5 years, or almost 2 years. So I was driving like everywhere. And councils there have their own little tiny cars. So I was driving in this tiny car, running around all over the place. So I know Auckland streets very well, different parts. So if you ever want to go to New Zealand, hey, I'm the guy. I can give you some tourist information. And so I worked there for 10 years. In a combination of Auckland Transport and Auckland Council. There I took a lot of barrier-free training from Barrier Free New Zealand. And also we set up a group called the CPAG, which was Capital Projects Accessibility Group. What that group was having kind of like the AAC, which I'll talk about later, what we have in Edmonton, different people representing many different disabilities all at the table at the same time. So we're reviewing projects like train stations, bus terminals, all these things that Auckland Transport was responsible for delivering. We got everybody in the room at the same time and looked at those projects. So that was great. And so we need to do this, definitely. I know I'm pushing hard for it in Edmonton. And then after that, I worked for the City of Toronto for 7 years, where I'm originally from. So don't hold it against me because I'm actually from Toronto. I'm a nice guy. And once in a while my Toronto accent will come out, I'm sure, because we have funny accents, I've been told. But it's funny because when I was in New Zealand, these Brits were saying to me, Rob, you speak the Queen's English. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, because we can actually understand you. Because a lot of the Kiwis, because they, as the Brits described, they speak with, sounds like they have marbles in their mouth. That's what they said. I didn't say it. So they could actually, they said, you enunciate everything lovely. So, okay, great, thank you. Anyway, enough about me. So, smooth moving. I stole this from an engineering document. It's from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. What it means is it's about smooth moving on highways. It's about pavement. It's about all that kind of stuff. Well, I stole the term and said, no, this is going to be about people now. Let's talk about people. Forget about talking about vehicles. We talk enough about vehicles and road safety and all that kind of stuff. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about universal design at first. I'm going to go through a bunch of things, talking about how to apply some of these principles into a number of different examples, which I'm going to show what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for those of you who are Clint Eastwood fans, you'll see a shot from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, the movie, which I love back in the day. And then we'll have a 10-minute bio break, and then we'll get into the group work. So I wanted to, that's why I was asking Gary, everybody to come forward, and we can get maybe 5 or 6 people at each table, and we can go a few. I got a bunch of images. I'll explain more later, but we'll get into it, and it'll be fun, I hope. So before I start, does anybody here actually have any universal design training? Just hands up. Any kind of knowledge of universal design? Do you know what I'm talking about? Sweet, okay, awesome. So there are some, that's great. And as Gary said, I'm pretty laissez-faire when I do presentations. If you guys have a question immediately, don't wait. Put up your hands or yell out at me and say, hey, Rob, because I want to answer them straight away, because sometimes I forget to come back to people. And yeah. So I'm going to talk about universal design, I almost said urban design, and why is it so important. Talk about the accessible journey, which is a concept in New Zealand. And then I'll talk about our lovely new access design guide, which just got completed at the City of Edmonton last year, it should be actually 2018 because it was December when it came out, but whatever, that's fine. It's a really good document, and I'm going to have a bunch of spare copies. I don't want to go back with these, please, so I'm going to leave them around. So you guys feel free who are really keen. I only have, I think, about 12, so whoever wants one, just take them, please. Because we're going to do a redo next year. We're going to update some stuff. So these are the last copies that I have. So feel free to take them. I got a bunch of other things too that you can take along as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Recover program, which is also happening at the City of Edmonton, because there's a universal design focus for this wellness plan that we're working on. When I start our presentations, I always like to show an image. And when I saw this one, I found it, I love it. It's a perfect image. For those who can't read the text, basically you see the image of the gentleman shoveling the snow at the stairs, the entry to the school. The little child in the wheelchair is saying, hey, could you please shovel the snow off the ramp? And the gentleman shoveling the snow says, oh, no, hold on a second. All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I'll clear the ramp for you. And then the little boy retorts back and says, hey, but if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in. Pretty basic, right? Pretty simple. So that's what universal design in a nutshell is about. It's not about people with disabilities. It's about everybody. So, Universal design, about creating places and things for as many people as possible. Some of these slides are going to come at you quick. I got lots of them. I don't like to read the text because I know all you guys are smart out there. You could read, so I'm just going to bang through them. Why is universal design so important? Because we want to create built environments that work for everybody. So yes, seniors and people with disabilities are important, but what about all those other ones? Parents pushing strollers, people carrying bags. Let's design it once. Let's do it right from the start, not have to come back and redo it time and time again. And well, I should take note because there's one of the gentlemen there on the pyramid of stairs or whatever. He's got a broken arm. You can be temporarily disabled as well, right? Come up here skiing and lovely Kananaskis. Oh, by the way, man, when I first drove up here, I was like, well, I'm being from Toronto. We have no mountains, right? These mountains are stunning. It was gorgeous. It was a great drive up. So I'm sure for her aren't used to it, you probably thought the same thing. Gorgeous view coming up. So importance of universal design in our projects. We always must think that even if the facilities aren't supposed to be focused on or focused on able-bodied citizens, we should always still think about. There will be times where some of these barrier-free or universal design elements are important for school tours, refuge in the time of disaster, all that kind of stuff, right? So like I said, it's better to do it straight away than coming back and having to refit the building later on. So why is this all so important? I have some stats here. So these are old stats. I'm waiting to get the new ones in. But for 2006, you can see Alberta, which has got a little yellow box around it. 15.8% of people in Alberta have identified themselves as having some sort of disability. It's growing, obviously. Types of different disabilities, you'll see a whole list of different ones. The reason I put the yellow box around those particular ones, because those are the ones that I'm generally focused on, because it's focusing on the built environment. So as you can see, they're pretty high. Right? There's a high percentage of people who have identified themselves as having a disability are pain, agility, mobility, seeing, hearing. All those things that when you move around in the cities and towns, wherever you, that's what you need, right? You need to be able to be guided around to get safely around. Some latest stats, these are from, Deanna provided these for me, because she deals with age-friendly Edmonton, which is a part of the city where they focus on obviously people who are retired persons and such. So you can see the numbers are going up from 2008 for like people who are 85 and up to 2016, grown from 9,700 to 12,500, right? So definitely it's getting higher. Now let's talk about universal design. So there's 7 basic principles of universal design. The first one, tolerance for error. The reason I show that image of a bike rack, this is a bike rack from the UK. And so what they did was, in all of their new bike racks they're putting in, which is basically, I can't remember the name of the bike rack they're called. Anyway, it has a tapper plate on the bottom. So that little plate at the bottom, that tapper plate is for somebody, obviously, who taps if they have a visual impairment as they're walking down the sidewalk. And then if they tap that, then they'll know there's something in the way and go around. If you don't have that, well, what's going to happen? You're going to be walking along, and if it's not located in the right, unexpected location along the sidewalk, you're going to get that bar right in your gut, right? It's not going to feel good. So those are important things to think about. Equitable use. I love that image because it shows a gentleman in a wheelchair playing with his sons. He's sitting at a park somewhere. I can't remember where I got that image from, but so interacting with the children right at a sandbox, right? The sandbox is lifted up off the ground. Wheelchair can get right under there, and he could really interact with them. It's not like he's sitting back and kind of reaching over and, actually interacting with his children. So that's awesome. Flexibility in use, showing a kitchen, cupboards can be changed, things can move. Simple or intuitive use. I have to apologize. A lot of my images are from New Zealand, so that's from Auckland. Train station. Just showing a train station, got a big sign. You can see that from far away. You know that's a train station. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Easy to understand. This is where I got to go to pick up the train. Perceptible information. Just shows a picture of a phone. It's got like blown up buttons that have pictures of their friends, their families. Just push that. They don't have to worry about calling, using a number. Low physical effort, obviously sinks and taps and da-da-da. And the last one, size and space for approach and use. So it shows This is, again, universal design, right? It's not talking about anybody with a disability. It's just saying that this house is now easier to get into if you have large boxes or whatever, because you can actually open up the front doors and turn it into double doors. Now, this is the concept of the accessible journey. This came in by the Accessible Public Land Transport Inquiry, Human Rights Commission, New Zealand, 2005. And so what they said was, and basically I've broken it down, if one link is broken or inadequate, the whole journey becomes impractical or impossible. So what that image is trying to show is it's showing that this is, you know, your whole community, your whole neighborhood, right? And it shows that I can move from the restaurant to my house, to the shops, to the community center, to the bus stop, to cross the street to go visit my friend. I can do all of that on my own. I don't need to call up an assisted vehicle. Like in Edmonton, we have the DATS program where you call up if you're in a wheelchair, a little mini bus comes to your door, takes you to your doctor's appointment, and then takes you to, you know, shopping. You have to book these like in a day or even more, 2 days in advance. They're not always on time because they're busy picking up and dropping off other people. So it's not the most reliable. It's a great system, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about it. It's just that there are some people that I know that if we designed our cities to be more accessible, they wouldn't need to use DATS. There will be people that will need something like that. There always will be. But a lot of the people that take DATS, I'm almost positive, they could get around our cities, especially in Edmonton, if we design them like this image, right? So they can get around on their own without having to rely on anybody. Okay, this is where it gets fun. Any engineers in the room? Sorry, I'm going to be a bit mean. But urban designers, engineers, right? I love engineers. I've been working with them for 10 years in Auckland. I learned a lot from them. They're awesome people, and they're so smart. You give them a problem, and they'll solve it. We just got to give them the right problems to solve, okay? So how much space do we need for the average person? Well, guess what? The average person back in 1960, whatever, when these kind of drawings were developed, was a single white male, right? 600 millimeters wide. So all our sidewalks in Edmonton are 1.5 meters wide. So somebody, if there's a wheelchair, another wheelchair trying to pass, boom, sorry, you can't, somebody's gonna have to go on the grass, right? You can't get around the person. Or just somebody like I'll show in the next image, which shows somebody with a wide, I almost said pram, it's a New Zealand thing, a stroller. Or if they have crutches, all these, we should be designing our cities for all of these people, not for that one dude on the left, right? 1.8 meters wide is the minimum sidewalk width now in the Complete Street Standards document, which was just finished in Edmonton. So that's great. And it's following a nationwide engineering standard. So all the sidewalks will be 1.8. Why 1.8? That's 2 wheelchairs can pass safely without hitting each other. Perfect. And on one thing we still forget about is bariatrics. So it's the medicine, the study of people who are obese, right? So thinking about people who have that issue as well. We got to think of all these people when we're designing our cities, not just that guy on the left. What about vision? We all see things differently, right? Some people have cataracts, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy. I got that right for a second. Age-related macular degeneration, color blindness, all these different elements. We're designing our city for people with these types of visual. Like imagine, the glaucoma, right? You're only seeing a small. It's like I don't have them with me, but I got some from the CNIB. She gave me these cards to actually put up to your face, and it actually makes it feel like you have that issue. If anybody's interested in one, I can give me your email address, and I'll get her to send you some. Because they're really kind of cool, because you walk around and you put this thing up in your eye, and you can actually see what these 5 things show you. And feel it, right? Feel it, how they feel every day of their lives. TWSIs, tactile walking surface indicators. You don't see many of them around. The only time you see them in Edmonton and Calgary, I don't know Calgary. I went to Calgary for the first time in my life last night. So that was fun. I liked it. I was only there a short time. It looked pretty cool. For those who are from both cities, I kind of like Calgary better. I enjoyed Calgary. It was really cool. Edmonton has some good parts, but I had a good time in Calgary. It's some really cool spots. But there's also some really, from an urban design point of view, not so great either. But anyway, TWSIs are usually, you just see them along the edge of the platform in the LRT, right? That's where you usually see them everywhere. Well, cities like Winnipeg are starting to put them like this. This is a shot from Winnipeg. So I always heard arguments from engineers when I first came to the city of Edmonton, oh, we can't do this. Rob, you do realize we're a winter city. Oh, shit, yeah, I know that. But last time I checked, Winnipeg has snow. They're doing it. Why can't we? Oops. So, yeah, we need to put more of those. So these grooves that they show up here, which you see them in Edmonton and Calgary, those aren't TWSIs. They don't provide the value for somebody with visual impairment to get around. Those are just to get the water off the sidewalk. Some engineer told me that, oh, those are for blind people. I said, are you kidding me? And then, so these ones are actually done, at least the lines are pointing in the right direction, like they're taking you to across the street. But I can show you, I don't have the images with me, I don't know there are lots of them, that actually direct the pedestrians into the center of the intersection. So if they were specifically designed to guide blind people, why would you guide them to the center of the intersection? So, yeah, not exactly right. Anyway, universal design at the city of Edmonton, yeah. So this is the AAC I was talking about. So at the City of Edmonton, which has been running for a very long time now, the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So there's a bunch of people that sit around the table and review projects, mostly from a policy point of view, but they do get involved in larger scale projects, i.e. Rogers Place. We were invited to Rogers Place probably a couple of weeks before it actually opened. So it was a bit late in the game, but at least we got to see it. We wandered around, we pointed out a bunch of things, and there was a whole group of people, like about, I don't know, 15, 20 of us, wandered around interior, representing this group, and provided Rogers Place a whole list of things. And I'll have to give them kudos. They are looking at fixing a lot of these problems. Some, they're like short-term fixes, which they've already done, which is great. Some medium and some long-term. Hey, at least they're trying, so that's really good. So that's a positive thing. Tools out there for us to use. There are a plethora of tools. So obviously we have the Alberta Building Code. There's Clearing Our Path, which is a really good document. That's the one at the top right. It's done by the CNIB. It's a very good document. On my presentation, I'm sure the conference will send them out. They're all linked. All these images are linked to those documents. So you should be able to find it pretty easy. And then there's the Access Design Guide, which I just talked about, which I'll talk a bit more about. And then right on the bottom right, this is fairly new, Bill C-81. It's the accessible legislation that the current government of Canada, is actually looking at implementing. It's in the first reading, so it's going to take a while, but at least they're starting. So we're finally catching up to other countries like Norway, New Zealand, Australia, United States. We're slowly getting there. That have a national act, right, for people with disabilities. So we'll get there. It's going to happen. Access Design Guide. I'm not going to read all this, but like I said, this document, which you'll be able to have a look at later as we do go through our workshop, it's focused on city projects. So community centers, parks, streets, everything that the city owns, right, runs. Doesn't apply to private buildings yet. We'll get there. Got to start small, right? So, wow, this is big. This is huge. And it's exciting that some of the staff are actually starting to use it at the city, which is great. So people are calling Deanna, Heather, myself, and say, hey, on page blah, 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 it says this. I think we should improve these drawings. Can you have a look at them and see what you think? So people are starting to use the document, which is really exciting. So that's good. And I have to totally thank the City of Calgary. City of Calgary has been awesome. They already had their Access Design Guide 2 years ago, I guess it was. If anybody here from the City of Calgary, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been around a while. We've actually they sent us their version, and we've kind of tweaked it and done some things that are more specific towards Edmonton, but there's we stole a lot of good stuff out of there. Why would you recreate the wheel? Somebody else has already gone to the trouble of doing all the work. Let's all of us work together in Alberta and get it done and make all our cities great. So like I said, I already talked about this. The background, you can see like tons of different groups that we consulted with when this took about 2 years to go through the whole process to finish it. So tons of different groups that were consulted, and I think it's a better document for it. And that's the parts that's broken up into. So it focuses on exterior, focuses on interior, and maintenance. Maintenance is really important, and I'll mention it when I start going through some of the images that I have. You'll see what I mean. Before I do that, just want to quickly give a shout out to the Recover team. Recover Edmonton's Urban Wellness Plan. It's this project. They've identified 5 downtown neighborhoods, and they're starting to look at them from the social innovation framework, testing, learning, and applying and adapting solutions. And that's what's so exciting, because they're taking these downtown neighborhoods that basically, they haven't really gotten a lot of renewal happen in them for a very long time. And there's a lot of people who live in those neighborhoods that, they don't have the education, they don't have the money, they don't have a job. It's not it's a really difficult life some of these people lead. And so we're trying to make those downtown neighborhoods function better for all. And this obviously includes people with disabilities. And so when the team started this project, they identified a number of questions. And so how do we best meet the needs of the people who are highly marginalized, and like I said, including those with disabilities? How do we support these how do we support thriving communities? How do we get them to thrive again? Because some of these downtown neighborhoods used to be like really great neighborhoods, and over time they've declined. How do we get them back up? And then how do we plan the wellness services to make sure that we take care of everybody? So it's not about just, we'll just push them out to the suburbs. See ya. We want to build our big tower, because that's what's happening, right? And so how do we build the communities and maintain them for the people who actually live there now? Project Welcome At. I was lucky enough to be involved with this. It's not too far from our building. Edmonton Tower is just across the street, a block over from this. This is the Boyle Street Community Services. And when you go in there, wow, there's so many cool volunteers. These people volunteer their time helping out these people who are on drugs and all kinds of, there's women there I met and I talked with them who've been beaten, by husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And it's really eye-opening when you go into these places. And the people are so friendly. And so we said to them, what could make your front door better? How can we make, it's not a major thing, but how can we make your life a little bit better? Because right now, there's only one little junky bench in front of Boyle Street, and no trees, nothing. It's just bleak concrete. And so a few of us, we all got together and came up with this idea. And that was, when I say a few of us, I meant most of the people from Boyle Street were at this, we created a workshop, and they said, we want more seating. We want more seating. We come here, we spend the day here, we have friends, we want a safe place to sit and then just enjoy it. When the weather is nice, which it is sunny in Edmonton from time to time, it's gorgeous. That's why I moved to Edmonton, because it's one of the sunniest cities, including Calgary, in Canada. Because I'm sick of the rain. I grew up in Toronto and I lived in Halifax. I'm tired of rain. So yeah, awesome. So sunny, yes, it's cold, who cares? It's nice and sunny, right? And so, yeah, they wanted places to sit out, maybe give us a couple umbrellas, maybe some planter boxes. So we just worked it out. One of the ladies who works on the team, she donated some of the planter boxes for about a couple of weeks because they use them on one of the Main Street projects that she was doing. So she said, you can take them. So then we filled them up with plants and little trees and stuff. People loved it. People hung out there for it was only supposed to stay there for about a week. It ended up like a month almost. It's really good. People enjoyed the space. Now, we've had to take out some of that stuff because it had to go back to whoever we borrowed it from. But now, Boyle Street is starting to put some of their stuff in, which is awesome. So they're getting people who actually visit Boyle Street every day, because some of these people have carpentry skills. Some of these people have other skills, and they're getting them to build planter boxes to put them out there. And they'll be owned by them. It's theirs. So they'll protect them. They'll make sure that nobody damages them. That's awesome. So, and part of it, obviously, from a universal design point of view, is they're looking at, when a permanent installation happens, looking at designing benches and other items that will be accessible for some of the people who go there who are in a wheelchair or just have difficulty moving around. So it's getting the two projects working together. Now, let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay? Some of the images are from Edmonton. A lot of them are from Edmonton, because there's a lot of ugly in Edmonton. Roller coaster driveway effect. I'm sure you all be familiar with this. For people who walk, it's not a big deal. Walking along the sidewalk and there's all these driveways and you're going up and down, right? If you're in a wheelchair, it does feel like a bloody roller coaster because you're doing that all the time. But I'm sure if you're not paying attention, you're looking down at your phone or whatever, you probably have scraped the bottom of your shoe a number of times when you're walking along and you're coming up from the driveway, because you can see I just drew these yellow lines, and that's kind of a representation of how you're doing that. And if you're close to the edge of the curb, that's how high it actually changes, the height of the sidewalk. So what should we be doing instead? We should be building a sidewalk that more than half of it is actually completely flat, all across, from one edge to the other. So the car actually has to slow down, either when they're exiting onto the driveway or exiting the driveway coming onto the street. You obviously know, I'm sure you've gotten it, why it was created like that. Engineers, right? Oops, too far. Engineers make it so that, because you got that 111 Avenue that's taken up, that's a 60K speed zone, right? So imagine you have a vehicle traveling 60K, another 60K vehicle behind them, got to turn off onto the driveway. That happens to be an entrance to a parking lot, if I remember correctly. If they have to slow down too much, which they would have to using that design, get rear enders, right? Because people follow really closely. So engineers have designed our cities so that people can get on and off the road as quick as possible with no issues. And I remember an engineer told me, this was actually in Auckland, Rob, we don't want to disturb the flow. Don't mess with the flow, he told me. You urban designers, you're always messing with our flow. I'm sorry, I'm going to mess with your flow. All right. Corner designs. Look at these intersections. This is Jasper Ave, right? This is supposed to be, when I came, Premier Street in Edmonton, right? Drop curb. The drop curb takes you, again, right to the center of the intersection. Ideally, we should design all our corners to do that. Direction takes you to cross the street wherever you got to go, this way or that way. None of the center stuff where you're kind of not sure where you're going, right? Many impediments to walking. And I know Edmonton, I've only been 3 years, but man, I know the downtown big time. I've been on every street, because that's what I do. When I go to a new city, I walk for like hours, and I'm like, my shoes, I just noticed I got a couple of holes in my shoes, man, and that's pretty bad. I gotta get some new shoes. But I walk it all the time, and to take pictures like this, and you can see like sandwich boards, bus shelters, rubbish bins, garbage cans, sorry, planters, signs, a pole, like you see on the bottom left, there's this big, massive pole in the middle of the sidewalk. These are the kind of things we shouldn't have on our sidewalk, especially when they're only 1.5 meters wide. Sorry, can we not put them on the sidewalk? So this is what we started doing in Auckland. So all of the, and now we're starting to do it here now in our city of Edmonton, because the Complete Streets says this, having a pedestrian zone, a movement zone, right? That's what it says in Complete Streets. This one here in particular is 2 meters minimum. So you're not allowed in that green zone, you're not allowed any sandwich boards, seating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff's got to go in the furniture zone, which is obviously where you see the street furniture. And the reason being is because somebody with a visual impairment, they use the building line. That's what they love. They love that because they can hear the sound reverb off the building. So they know where they are. If you stick them out close to the road, they kind of have difficulty in trying to establishing where they are, and they get lost. So keep them on the building line. That was difficult in Alberta because the Alberta Liquor Commission had a rule previously that you had to have all your tables and chairs against the facade of the building. That's changed. So that's great. So now we can start shifting stuff out to where I've shown there and keep that pedestrian zone clear. If we're going to put, just to mention, if we're going to put seating along the building line, that's okay. You can do that. But you need to create some sort of either short little fencing or planter boxes or something to actually delineate the space. You don't want to have just a couple of random table chairs sitting out there by themselves, because that's when you get accidents happen. If you delineate the space, somebody has a visual impairment and they're caning, or if they have a guide dog, they'll just move around that impediment. It's not a big deal. Diverting pedestrians during construction. A lot of construction in Edmonton. If you go downtown Edmonton right now, it's like a construction zone, which is exciting because all these things are happening. It's cool. but not good if you're wanting to get around the city. So you can see this was out for a couple of days, if I remember correctly. They're redoing the facade of the building and all that kind of stuff. So instead of putting a sign there and saying, hey, there's a pedestrian crossing just a few meters back, tell them to cross there and not, get them to come all the way here and then realize, oh crap, I gotta go back. I'm hoping we're gonna get better at this. But yeah, so I got a lot of examples of that. Here's another one. This was right near, not too far, you can see City Hall on the top left there. So, this lady decided to walk on the road. Probably not the best solution, but she's able-bodied. That's cool, fine. But somebody in a wheelchair, not so easy. This is how you do it. So here's an example of some major construction we were doing in a suburb in Auckland, and brand new train station was being built. So what the engineers did, they came up with a beautiful idea. They got all those lovely orange barriers that are filled with sand or water or whatever, laid them all out. They put in a temporary zebra crossing, as you can see there, signed it, and it's a nice diversion to get around. No issues, no problems. Life is good for everybody. Shared spaces. I could do a whole seminar on shared spaces. For those who don't know what shared spaces are, basically it got created probably in the 60s in the Netherlands, and was by a gentleman named Hans Monderman, who's like a guru. And he came up with this concept of creating these shared spaces. So basically what it means is from building line to building line, the entire street, sidewalk, road is all one level. No discernible difference, right? Which is great. Cars and vehicles and cyclists and dogs and everybody's supposed to share the space and live in harmony, la, la, la. Great, beautiful idea. But what about people with disabilities? How do they know where they are in the space? So in Edmonton, this is 96th Street, which was finished probably just before I came to Edmonton. And so you can see that concrete kind of band, which is solid all the way down on the left-hand side of the picture there. You could say, oh, Rob, well, they put that up. That shows you the barrier between the sidewalk and the road. Well, no, sorry. That's all the same material. So nobody, if they couldn't see, there's no way they could tell that was telling you, oh, look out, there may be cars in this zone. Solution, and it's an easy one. In Auckland, we did 8 shared spaces downtown, and they all look like that. They all have what's called a tactile delineator strip. So the urban designers, some of the people on my team back then, we can't have these TWSIs going through our shared spaces. They're going to look ugly. It's this big yellow band. It's going to look awful, right? So what we did was we took the whole group of our disability group, took them out to a parking lot that the city owned, and we threw out a bunch of pavers and started like piecing together something. And that's what they came up with. Working with us all together, we came up with a tactile delineator strip. What it is, it's a rough sawn cobble. So what they do is they take a cobble and they cut off the top of it. So somebody in a wheelchair can get over it, so it's not too bumpy. It's easy enough for somebody in a wheelchair to get across, and they're not going to tip out or whatever. But you can feel it in your feet. You can actually feel it. And the key is it has to be a minimum of 600 millimeters wide. If it's not that wide, somebody could step over it inadvertently and miss the whole thing, and then suddenly you're in the middle of the road, right, and get hit by a car. So that's the solution. And it's amazing because we had people coming from the UK, because the UK in London, they were rolling out a bunch of them and didn't have that design feature. And blind organizations and a whole bunch of different groups in London were yelling and screaming, we want these shared spaces ripped out. We hate them. We don't like them. And so they came and they saw these and they're like, wow, this works. So the little brother, way across to the other side of the ocean, came up with the idea. So I don't know if I think they started rolling them out in London, so that's great. Maintenance. This is what I was talking about, maintenance before. This is at the Clareview LRT station in lovely Edmonton. Got 2 disabled parking spaces, and as you can see in the image, there is a drop curb. Problem is there's this big chunk of asphalt, right? Maintenance hasn't happened. So they need to strip that down and make it smooth, because somebody in a wheelchair will not be able to get from their car onto the sidewalk to get to the LRT. This is right downtown. This is right near City Hall. This is 103, if I remember correctly. There is, on the right of you'll see that's the Rivera, it's a retirement living apartment building. And then further to the right, there is the Subdivision Appeals Board. I can't remember the exact name. So obviously that's a public, it's a City of Edmonton building, right? So public. So if somebody who is in a wheelchair wants to go to those two facilities or even go to City Hall, they park their car in the two disabled parking spaces. But then when they get out, they have to go all the way to where you can see that where the stop sign is. That's where the drop curb is to get up onto the sidewalk. So they have to wheel on the road, risking life and limb. Yeah. So how should we be doing them? Like this. We should have the disabled parking space, and there should be a ramp right beside them so that somebody could get out of their car, put their wheelchair out, get in it, and wheel up onto the sidewalk. You don't have to go down the road. This one's a funny one. For those of you who know Edmonton, this is right near the Kingsway LRT station. So it's pretty new. Just got finished 2 years ago. It's our high-speed rail I like to talk about. I'm just being facetious because it's not very fast. But anywho, so at this intersection, to find the push button to get across is very difficult. So you can see there's a crossing there that goes from the right to the left of the screen. To activate that particular crossing, you can see the green arrow on the bottom. It's pointing to that pole there. That's where that picture is. So you can see where that lady and the child is standing. That's where the button should be. It should be over there near that barrier where I've indicated with the other green arrow on the top. It should be somewhere around there. So it actually has it where the crossing is. But they've actually tucked it in behind. So if you're standing at the crossing, I defy you to find it because it's actually tucked behind the pole. That button is not to cross where those X's are. You can't, there's no pedestrian crossing there. That's why those X's are there where the tracks are. You're not allowed to cross there as a pedestrian. So to find the push button, you got to go around the back of the pole. I don't know how you would know it's there. I can see it. I couldn't find it. It took me a while to find it because I was looking, where's the button? So I found it. So the simple solution is to put a smaller pole. It's pretty, yes? Sure. Great question. The lady's question, for those who didn't hear, it's about having data to show that some accidents were actually, for somebody with a disability, have they gotten hit by a vehicle at some of these types of crossings? Yeah, or something, yeah. I'm going to find that out. I'm not sure. I don't know if they take that specific data. I'm sure there is somewhere that somebody has some data about that, but that's a great question. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, it definitely happened. And I know our engineers are actually, in my opinion, reacting too far the other way. So what they're doing is instead of installing just a regular zebra crossing with the push buttons, the lights activate, right? They're everywhere in Ontario. It's pretty simple. And I know they're here too. I've seen them. But they're putting fully signalized crossings now at minor intersections. And I don't understand that. There's no value in it. You're spending double the amount of money to put in the infrastructure, and you're putting a traffic light like a red, green, yellow, standard kind of traffic light for a minor crossing. So it's just a lot of money. And then what happens is drivers, when a pedestrian activates it, and it takes a while sometimes for them to actually turn red for the pedestrian to cross, depending upon the timings on that particular corridor. When it finally does turn red, pedestrian crosses, then it takes a while to go back to green again, right? Drivers get annoyed, I see here waiting, there's only one pedestrian crossing, blah, blah, blah. I'm worried over time is that cars will ignore them because they're like, there's nobody ever crosses here. The damn thing turns red and nobody ever crosses. They're just going to blow through. Somebody's going to get killed. So I would strongly suggest that they would just go back to a proper zebra crossing that has the lights over the street, not on the side, over the street so you can see them far away. PED comes up, pushes the button, lights start blinking. The lights in Toronto or in Ontario, a lot of them they have lights at the top, and they actually have down lights that shine down. So when you activate, when you push the button, these lights come on, and at nighttime it's like, whoa, because the whole thing lights up. It's like a runway. It's beautiful. So the drivers can see it, no problem. Peds can see very well. Get across, beautiful. The new ones we're starting to install at the city are these ones that are located on the side of the road. And because Edmonton has 6-lane roads, they're hard to see sometimes, particularly if you have a larger vehicle beside you. So you imagine driving along, and you have a big rig beside you or whatever, and then these flashers, and they're very bright. They're very bright flashers. And if you have a neighborhood, like I can think of right near, not too far from my house, near Kingsway, actually, station, somebody got killed there last year. The gentleman who was driving the vehicle was intoxicated, so there's a different reason. But the point is, I know my wife has driven there many times picking up my daughter at McEwen because she swims there sometime in the swim team. She's not in university, but she's a swim team. And she's younger. But the crossing, the lights, when they start flashing, when a ped activates them, they're like these long bars, and they have these really bright lights. It blinded my wife. She said, because there's not much street lighting along Kingsway at that particular location. It's really dark. So when these lights start, boom, they just blind you. Like that light back at the room is blinding me. So you kind of lose vision a bit. You see these dots in front of you. The smarter way is to have the lights overhead the street. So you can see them from far away, and you can see them if there's a big truck beside you. It's pretty simple. LRT. I was still, and Calgary was the same way. I was like, why is there a step to get up to the LRT? I don't understand that. And nobody's really explained it to me, I think, effectively. I think what the reason is, and if there's anybody at the City of Edmonton here that knows about the ETS, I think the reason is that they haven't included as part of the package when they bought the trains to actually have a variable, what do they call it? It's like a spring-loaded, so if they get more people in the cars, they actually can vary in height, right? So what they've done is they've just left it at a particular setting so that even if there's like an Eskimos game or an Oilers game and it packs up, the train is packed and it's heavy, if it ever does go down, it'll go down just to the top of the platform, right? Because that's the danger. If you get too many people, it could actually go below the platform, then you have problems. But in Toronto, they just got new subways. They've been having some issues with them. I shouldn't have showed Toronto, I should have showed Vancouver. But anyway, a lot of subway systems have the variable. They had to fix this. Toronto had when I first introduced the new Bombardier trains, right at the first week, they were packed up on the rush hour, and unfortunately the train went below the platform. So people had to step up onto the platform because they didn't get the numbers right. But now they have them. In Auckland, we were smarter. What we did was, at Auckland Transport, these guys, as I said, the engineers are geniuses. They took the new trains that we bought from a company in Spain, and they filled them with sandbags. And they just run them up on the weekends just to test them. And they fill them as heavy as they can get them to test that variable system to make sure that it doesn't go below the platform. And it worked. So, yeah, I don't know why we can't get that right. Now, there are accessible doors at every train in Edmonton. You know, there's a 3-car set, so each one has one accessible door. So it's not a horrible thing. But if you're in a wheelchair and you're older and you have trouble getting to the train on time, to know where your actually door hits, because you can see on the platform there's actually an indicator. There's that blue square that shows the wheelchair, but not every door has one. It only has it on one. There's only one on, I've seen a few stations that may have 2, but they don't, and then the drivers, they have to line up perfectly with that, which they always, not always, but sometimes they don't. So when they stop at the station, sometimes they're a bit askew. So if you have somebody who's waiting right at that marker and thinking that door's gonna be right there, sometimes they're a bit off. And if you're not quick, you have to get there in time, push the blue button, which is below the yellow button. That activates, you can see that yellow bar that's inside. It's actually a really cool ramp, and it actually drops down like this. Great for winter climate, makes total sense. There's nothing wrong with this design. It works, it does its job. But my first question was, why can't we have all the doors accessible? Why does it have to be only one on each 3-car set? Simple. This one's the strange one. This is at McEwen Station in Edmonton, and there's a pedestrian crossing at a curve, which you should never do, and I'll explain why but in the next one. But this is, we love putting those big barriers at all our pedestrian crossings. They look like, I thought there was like a road there, because it's pretty substantial infrastructure, right? It's like a big rail crossing. Instead of, a lot of countries just do like swing fences, things like that. Oh, she's in Calgary. They just had this yellow fence, and it just said, watch out for trains, right? Pretty basic. So yeah, they go hardcore on the safety, which is great. Problem is, this, if you look at the infrastructure there, you could see where that gentleman's standing. There's that infrastructure that's holding up the arm. So it's this gray bit, and it's about this wide, right? The arm is only a little skinny thing, but it's that gray infrastructure you can see holding up the arm. When that thing comes down, imagine if you're in a wheelchair and you're sitting right beside that yellow bar. That thing comes down, it's going to take you right on the head. So what they should have done is design some little fence around there so that when this barrier does come down, there's no risk of somebody getting hurt. Because you can see at the height of that gentleman, where his backpack is, that would be at the height of somebody who's sitting in a wheelchair, right? So they would hit their head, that gray infrastructure that's holding the barrier, if they're standing in the wrong place. This is why I said you should never put a pedestrian crossing on a curve. Look what happens. I put my pen, this is, so that's one of my just regular standard kind of pen. Pretty big gap, right? There's a reason for it, because the train's got steel wheels. Steel wheels don't give. They need that space as they make their turn. Beautiful. I have no problem with the engineering. Works fine. But I was there one time just taking pictures of McEwen Station, which is just next to this crossing. A lady in a mobility scooter, she got stuck in there. Thank God there was no train coming. So me and this other gentleman ran down and helped her kind of, those things are pretty heavy. You ever lifted up somebody in a mobility scooter? And pick her up, and then she just tootled off on her way. So I don't know if it's because of me complaining or somebody else, but they went in and installed a steel rail. Must be a year ago now. You can see I just threw a business card down there to show you the gap. So it's not as bad as it once was. Still not ideal. But now, the poor people who live in the apartment buildings beside where this curve is, they hear this screeching sound because the train comes around the corner, and obviously it's rubbing against that plate. So hopefully they don't find out if I was the one, they're going to hate me. But, well, truthfully, the mistake was they should never have put the pedestrian crossing at a curve. Should put it a straightaway. It's just so much easier to handle for pedestrians. Rogers Place. The picture on the left shows when it was first built. So it shows this little staircase. And the reason I'm showing this is because you see these staircases everywhere around the world. Landscape architects, now I'm going to pick on the landscape architects. If there's any in the room, beware. Landscape architects, they love showing these stairs that kind of flow out of nothing, right? It's just a flat space, and suddenly you got 1 stair, 2 stair, 3 stair. It looks beautiful, right? And I'll show some even nicer images after this. It looks great. Problem is, they're hard for people to see with a visual impairment, especially if it's all concrete like this situation. So you're walking along, are there 2 stairs? Are there 3 stairs? How many stairs are there? They do have, at least they put some, you can see this black material they put at the top of the stair. That's great. So as you're walking down the stairs, you can see the differentiation between the 2 stairs, or the different stairs as you go down. Problem is, when you're approaching the stairs straight away, you don't see the differentiation. You can't see that black strip because it's at the top. So you need something on the front face of the stair to show you that it's not a wall, it's actually a set of stairs. So here's another example. This is from, I think, the one on the left, I think it's from Portland, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but it's like, oh my God. They combine a ramp with the stairs. Architecturally, landscape architect, looks cool, right? But man, person in a wheelchair or somebody who has a visual impairment and they're trying to walk up those stairs, not easy. Now, it's funny. This is on the right. It's a train station in Auckland, and so I had imagine the yellow stuff not there and the poles not there. So I called up our guys and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing? I've seen the design of this thing. You have no TDM size. You have nothing. The stairs kind of flow out of nowhere. I already gave you the presentation. I explained to you why this is a no-no, and they still built this." And so I said, well, we need to do something. Oh, don't worry, Rob, we'll fix it. So they went out there and they stuck bollards with yellow things on the top, and they put TWSIs and the yellow strips on the stairs. They went nuts. Like I said, universal design gone wild. Didn't have to do that. The easier solution is to design a set of stairs like the one on the left, separate the ramp and the stairs. Don't try to combine them. Don't try to weave them, whatever. Separate them so that it's clear and easy. And the only mistake they made on the stairs on the right, or the picture on the left that shows the stairs, they should have added the yellow strips on the nosings of each of the stairs. So have it at the front of the nosing and at the top. So then you can clearly see it's a set of stairs. It's not a concrete wall. So next time when you walk, if you're going up to walking up a set of concrete stairs, just squint a bit. That's all you need to do. Squint a bit. And you'll see that that set of stairs will suddenly look like a concrete wall. Okay? Development applications. We get a few of these in Edmonton. This one was kind of the funny one for me. It was kind of early in the game when I first got involved in the urban design team at the city, and they sent me these drawings. Apparently, I'm going off by one of my colleagues who's been working for the city of Edmonton for probably over 13 years now. She told me that when this building, this is just off of White Ave, it's about a block away from White Ave, it apparently, according to her, was marketed as a building to be accessible for everybody. So watch this. So the green bit, that's the entry to the apartments above. So it's a mixed-use building, so ground floor retail, 3 stories of apartments up above. Well, there's a step to get up to the elevator where that green portion is. You can't go straight into the doors there. There's a little step there. And there's a step at each entry along this frontage and the other frontage of the building, except for where that yellow bit is. That's smooth access, right off the sidewalk. Perfect. The good thing is, that's a bakery. It's a good bakery. So if you're ever in Edmonton, I can't remember the name, but it's a good bakery. Problem is, when you get into that bakery, you can't access the rest of the building. So at least you can go eat some nice treats and stuff, but you can't go up to your apartment if you're in a wheelchair. And then the worst part is, somebody hand-painted, it looks like, because that's not a city one. On the right-hand picture, you can see there's they put a disabled parking space there. Look where they stuck it. Right behind the parking space is a pole. So there's 3 parking spaces there. There's 2 more on the left of the picture. So imagine if you parked in the disabled parking space and somebody parked beside you, you wouldn't be able to back out because you'd hit the pole. So pretty useless. Okay, let's take a little intermission because I think we need that. Yeah, 10 minutes. Yes, perfect. And then we'll come back and then we'll go through the exercise that I have prepared. Is there any questions now that you wanted to ask right now before we have the break, or any burning? No? Okay, cool. Oh yes, sir. Great question. So how does the TWSIs work in the ice environment? The ones in Winnipeg, they're using a product. It's iron, I think. And so it has, when it's founded, it's got some grit in it. Like it's got some bumps and things. They've been testing different product, and apparently the one they've come up with, the one they've installed, works fine. They still have to brush them out. So when you go to Winnipeg in the wintertime, you'll start seeing these brushes around, I'm sure, going cleaning them out. They're not going for, because I didn't really explain it, but there's the tactile warning indicators, which are the yellow dots, and then there's the guiding ones. That's the long strips. You don't see many of those. I don't think you see any of them in Canada. I haven't seen many. Maybe some at airports and stuff that actually guide you to a location. Those wouldn't be a smart thing to add in all our sidewalks like they do in other countries. Like if you go to Tokyo, you go to Japan, they're everywhere. That wouldn't work out so hot here because of the snow and the ice. But you could at least have the warnings at the intersections. Because they're doing it in Winnipeg. And last time I checked, it does snow and freeze in Winnipeg. Yeah. Sure. Brick sidewalks. Yeah. I know. Really? Okay, yeah.
Can I suggest that you hold your question until everybody comes back in so that we're
sure. Thank you.
Sharing information with everybody, and we'll get you to start off.
Perfect.
The responsibility's on your shoulders.
Thank you. Sure. I'm going to put them out on the tables anyway, because I You guys are going to need them for the workshop anyway. So.
This feeling inside my bones, it goes electric wavy when I turn it on. Off from my city, off from my home, we're flying up no ceiling when we in our zone. I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off of it, moving so phenomenally. So don't stop. And under the lights, when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do.
Ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully this broadcast is going to reach outside, we are going to start momentarily. So if we could please gather. Yeah, the intermission is drawing to a close. Yeah, let's get with it, Rob. Okay, welcome back. Could you please take your seats, and Robert is going to continue on. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that we will be out of here at 3, because there are other events happening in this room. So the sooner that we're able to access Robert's knowledge, the better. And we'll start off with that gentleman in the orange T-shirt, if you could ask that second question. You forgot? Okay.
That's okay.
That's permissible.
But remember, if it comes back to you, just wave your hands. Hey, Rob, be quiet. Yeah, exactly. Flag me down. Oh, we have a question here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's in the Canadian, whatever the Canadian engineering document is for roading. I can't remember the name. That's it, TAC, thank you. It's in the TAC standard this year, or last year, sorry. It was early last year when they redid them. 1.8 was the standard for sidewalk width, yeah. So that's why we adopted it in the Complete Streets standards document. Because Edmonton had a Complete Streets guideline, but now it's a standard, yay. Oh, that's okay. Oh. I think it's okay. Oh, we'll see how it goes. I can talk louder. I'm loud. I'm from Toronto, right? So the second half, or part 3 of the group work. So what I got a bunch of images here. And what I was going to do is I'll just pass them around. And then it looks like everybody, we've got the copies out there of the document. You can go through them and see if you can pick out a few things. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about the funicular. So the Mechanized River Valley Project, AKA the funicular, was just finished last year. And so just to preface my comments, I'm not saying anything bad about it holistically. It's a great project. It's linking the downtown to the river valley. You can go from downtown now all the way down to the river. It's an amazing project. However, it's got some universal design issues. So here's the project. It was open last year. Everybody was going crazy. For those of you who don't know Edmonton, that's downtown Edmonton there. You can see that's where the funicular is. And it looks like this, right? It's pretty. It cuts right from the old hotel. I always forget the name. Thank you, Hotel McDonald. I'm still learning Edmonton, sorry. I'm short memory. Hotel McDonald, and you can walk down or take the funicular, which is, obviously that's the reason for the visit, right? It's that car that moves up and down the track, just like the ones they have in Quebec. And then you go across the bridge, and then you take an elevator down, or stairs, and it takes you right down to the base. You can actually almost get down and touch the water, right? Cool project, awesome. Connecting the city to the river, beautiful. Here's what it looks like at the top. So for those who haven't been there yet, so you get this beautiful view of the river valley in Edmonton. It's gorgeous. The trees are starting to all turn now yellow. It's stunning. Beautiful view. They did a really good job. That's the entrance to the funicular. There's the funicular on the left. Unfortunately, somebody smashed one of the glass panels. That's not an effect, which I went there and thought, did they do something on purpose? No, somebody broke that pane of glass. But anyway, that's the funicular. Takes you up and down this lovely staircase. And when I spoke to one of the landscape architects who worked on the design, the idea was rocks in a waterfall, right? See, the waterfall is coming down from the top of the valley where the hotel is, coming down the stairs, and you got your rocks kind of intermittent along the staircase, right? Looks pretty. Some artwork along there. There's like these swirling sculptures. That's the bridge that crosses Grierson Hill Road. I think I got that right. Huh? I did? Beautiful. There we go. See, I'm getting better. And then there's the elevator. You can see on the right-hand side picture, you can see the elevator at the end of that route, and that's the elevator that takes you right down to the river valley. That's just another view of the elevator looking, like there's a little platform there. You can look out over the river. It's a beautiful view. And then this poor lady, I'm a big advocate of cycling. I cycle to work every day. I won't do it in the winter, though. I'm a bit of a wuss, but I do it all year, all nice weather time, all year long, as much as I can. Probably 8 months, okay? Don't hate me. But then this poor cyclist, she was struggling to get up her bike up this They told me it was a cycle wheel ramp. But anybody who knows how to design a proper cycle wheel ramp, you wouldn't design it like this. Because she was struggling like big time. You can see her. She's got her handlebars, and it keeps banging against there, and it's really tight. And I can hear her just like breathing heavy. So I ran. I was pretty sad. I should have went and helped her before I took the damn picture. But I'm taking a picture of her struggling up the stairs, and then I run down and help her. Right? How mean. Anyway, well, I had to get the struggle right. And then so I helped her, pull up her bike, and then she can go on her merry way. And then this is when you get down. If you don't, I chose not to take the elevator. I took the stairs, so that's the stairs. And then there, right at the bottom, it's a beautiful little kind of we call it placemaking, right? Urban designers placemaking. It's got this little kind of, concrete area where you got a couple of benches. There's a nice view of the river. You can look up. You can see the Hotel McDonald's, the elevator, all that kind of stuff, right? Really nice. So you made it down. So now the task is, I got a bunch of photos, and I was just gonna, I was supposed to hand these out during the break, but I was chit-chatting too much with everybody. But I got a bunch of images. Can you? Yeah, Pat, that'd be great. Just circulate a bunch of them, like do a couple at each table or whatever you can do. And then so what I'd like you guys to do is have a look at these images. And then I'd like you, I don't know why it says 1, 1, 1. I guess I lost the 1, 2, 3. Anyway, that's what happens when you convert stuff from Google, because at Edmonton we use Google Sheets or whatever, and it converted it to PowerPoint. I didn't even notice that, but whatever. So 1, 1, 1. So the first one, just review the photos on your table. Identify some universal design issues. So whatever we've talked about already. And then using your own experience and knowledge, and or you can use the Access Design Guide, because there's a bunch of copies floating around. And if you don't have one, because I don't have any more, everybody took mine. So if you guys don't have one at whatever table, just go to the other table and ask to sit with them and look through it, and see if you can identify at least. Let's do maybe 1 or 2 things at each table, right? Identify a universal design issue, some of the issues we've talked about already today, and come up with a solution, right? What are your thoughts on a solution? So look at the issue that you see on the picture. What would you do to make it better? And if we have some time left, which we probably won't, let's give you, actually, well, yeah, we got time. Let's say we'll give you like maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then I can go through I'll go through the images really quickly, and we could I could explain some of the things if we've missed any, or if there's any things that I've noticed that we should also talk about as well, we can do that. And then we'll be done. All right? So I'll give you, let's say 15, 20 minutes. Have a look at those. You didn't get any images yet? You have? Oh, these guys are hogging them all? Oh, I got some more. Okay, here he's go. He's got some more. Any questions, just hand up and I can come and help out. Whatever, I'll just wander around. I'm sorry? That's okay. Yeah. No, I was just going to do a few. I didn't know how many. I didn't think we'd get that many people, so I was just like, I feel that's okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's. Just a lot of passion for it, and yeah, just better shut this off because I'm. Okay. All right, Gary's told me we gotta stop now. So maybe I'll just do the walk around and actually, you know what? What I did was I took all the images and put them on the slides. So if somebody want to call out a number, we can just look at that one. You guys, whatever table that has that one that you want to talk about, we'll just all talk about it as a group. Oh, it's going to be a lot because there's like a lot of pictures. But if we want, we can start. Yeah, let's start it out. Okay, so number one. Who has number one? You guys have. So did you guys? Yeah. Do you have the microphone? Oh. We'll get the microphone. It'll be easier so everybody can hear. There we go.
Okay, so we saw that at the very entrance of the funicular, maybe there's missing some guidelines for people with disabilities that could guide them into the funicular. That's one. Maybe we're missing some visual cues for the instructions in the funicular, sound cues also, and finally having some painting like in the nose of the steps of each stair might be really helpful for anyone to figure out that there's a stair over there, and not only as a point for watching the landscape, but also there's a stair there. Yeah,
excellent.
That's all.
Great work, guys. All right, image 2. Anybody look at that one? Oh yeah. Oh boy, these guys are busy.
So we noticed one of the sculptures there is kind of intruding onto the boardwalk.
Yeah.
And we're not too. We think the boardwalk it might be a little bit warped, so it might be hard to push a wheelchair across. So if you could maybe have a different material where people with wheelchairs can track along, and then having some of the indicator strips where those poles are to the right, so you don't kind of go off trail and maybe bump into one of those or go off into the grassy area.
That last point is good, but I would suggest that you don't really need the strip all the way along. Because people with a visual impairment, they're really good at caning, and they can actually sense edges. So as long as you have a curb, so that's where the shared spaces that remember I talked about, the shared spaces are problematic in that it's all flat. But if you have a curb edge, they can detect that. So that's not too concerning. The biggest one is that sculpture that's kind of sitting in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, overall, sure.
It being wood.
Oh, pass the microphone, yeah.
Yeah, what about our comment about it being made out of wood and wood slats and that rotting over time?
Yeah, it's the maintenance thing.
It's the maintenance.
Bang on. There's nothing wrong with having the wood boardwalk. It's just maintaining it. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Maybe we should. Whoever has 3, this one is a really interesting one. Oh, you have that. Oh, we guys went in order. Maybe we'll do another one. Yeah, we'll do another one. Just call out a number, and I'll click to it.
The man in orange. Which one?
The man in orange. What do you got? Oh, you got to make me work now. I'm not that creative. I can't get there quickly, but whatever. That's all right. Almost there. There we go. 34.
Okay, 34. I guess we were thinking about there's no color at all. It's just dark steel. Yeah. But we weren't sure if the rail down the staircase was at the right height.
Yeah.
And also just the vertical posts, if they were, I guess, either too close together or too far apart.
Yeah.
Someone lose a wrist or something like that.
Yeah.
And just the clear glass as well. There was no tape or tactile delineation of the glass, and if you didn't see, you just keep walking into the sunset, and that would be that.
All great points. I have to give kudos to the designers because they actually have the handrail curving around, which is great because a lot of handrails you'll see, and I saw some in Calgary yesterday when I was walking around, they actually stick out, right? Like it's just this handrail kind of sticking out right in the main path of travel, so somebody could actually poke themselves in the gut with the handrail. So this is a positive thing, and all the other things you've mentioned. The other thing that's mentioned in the ADGs is we've been really pushing to steer away from the metal metal handrails, looking for more natural materials because the metal gets cold, right? So it's not the greatest. But obviously from a maintenance issue, the steel is much preferred for many reasons, of course. But yeah, that's one thing that we pointed out in the ADG. Okay, next one. Another number. Throw another number at me. You got 19 and 21. Let's do 21 first. We're there. Oops. There we go. Yes. Oh, here comes the microphone.
21, we were thinking maybe the ramp coming up on the right there, maybe the seating could be turned around the other way so that, I don't know, just more access to it easily. The other thing we were thinking about, maybe if someone was visually impaired or something, maybe they'd want to have like a handrail on both sides of the bench instead of just one side. The other thing, we weren't sure how high these were, if a child could sit up on that, or and also maybe some markings on the side because everything's all concrete.
Yeah, perfect. You guys, amazing. Because that's one thing. I'm sorry I didn't put measurements on these things because I should have. I ran out of time. But yeah, the measurement, like you can see the arm rest, you know, the little handle. It's too short. It should be a bit taller because it won't be comfortable. And the backrest, it's great that they have a armrest and a backrest because a lot of our benches in Edmonton don't. So that's positive. Problem is it's not very high. So it actually, for some people, it'll dig right into the center of your back as you're leaning back. It's not very comfortable, right? So, and you're right about the concrete block at the bottom, which is, you know, long-lasting material. That's great, but the color differentiation is not so hot. So it mixes in with the floor. So somebody with a visual impairment could run, especially the one on the top, if they're walking that way, that could get lost in the concrete around it, and you could bang your knee against it, right? So it's giving that color differentiation. And you mentioned that little ramp. That's the ramp on the right-hand side. That's the ramp that goes basically up the bridge over Grierson Hill Road, and that's the staircase. Remember the staircase I showed you with that poor lady pushing up her bike? And what you said, 19.
Yeah, this one's similar to what you said in your presentation. The bike racks, someone could like just run into those because there's no bar at the bottom. I mean, I can see if you have a bike, you'd want it to be open like that, though. That's really the only thing we could think of on that one.
Well, those bike racks are unique in a way that I think a lot of people who use them don't know how to use them properly. Because for those who cycle a lot, how would you park your bike in that bike rack? I want to hear. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. But no, seriously, if you're trying to park your bike in that, how would you park your bike in that one? Because I had to figure it out. I was like, how do you do it? And I figured it out finally.
Would you put your tire in between the little grooves?
That's what I thought at first, but no, that depends on the kind of bike you have. It won't fit. And the problem is if you stick your bike right in it, basically your bike is going to be sticking way out into the sidewalk, right? So what you're supposed to do is park it beside it because it's a bar, right? It's a bar that does that. And so you park your bike beside it, and then you lock it up using that on the side. But it's not really clear. And here we go, right? Design. It's not clear how to use the darn thing. You need a description. Yes, sir? I'm sorry? Yeah, they can't. The gentleman's asking if they can fit a U-lock. It would be very difficult. Yeah, they're too fat. So fitting a U-lock in there would be difficult, for sure. Another number. Call out another number you guys want to talk about. Anything else? 13. All right. Here we go. Lucky 13. This one's a good one.
So in this image, we have some obvious challenges.
Yes.
There's clearly a maintenance issue. We're assuming that's water, and that's why that is heaved and created that over time for that utility access. We don't have a tactile cue to the mulch area or any sort of barrier for the mulch area to not be spilling its every time there's a rainfall into the walkway. Also, with no pedestrian crossing nearby, we couldn't quite figure out why this was ramped, because the grade goes down towards, looks like we only have an 1.5 inch curb on the one side, but what that is ramping towards when there's no pedestrian crossing, we couldn't quite determine. And then for anyone with a visual impairment, the fact that you have that sort of concrete funnel trap into a tree area, you could find yourself in there and locked in, and then really it's just a barrier to, like, you're taking a hard left to get to the other pedestrian space. It really looks as though one area was well thought through and designed and applied, but then the transitional space was kind of lost in that project.
Again, all great points. The transitional space, obviously that's an existing, those bricks have been there for a very long time. That's in front of the Hotel McDonald. The project had its scope, and the scope basically ended where that concrete ended. So it's typical, right? So yeah, that maintenance issue, that's been there for a while, I'm pretty sure. And so that, yeah, hopefully that's going to get sorted out soon. This is 100th Street going down the hill. So this street's going to go down big time. So that's why it has that slope. And because you're at the top of a hill where it's a 4-lane road, high-speed travel, they're not going to put a crossing there for sure. I'd love to see one day somewhere close by. Right now, we're currently talking about putting a bridge over, but that's, yeah, in the future. But yeah, but all great points. And I love the fact that you picked up the point about the, on the left, just having the, all the wood chips spilling out, and that could be a trip hazard as well, because you could turn your ankle if you step right on that corner, for sure. So again, you guys are awesome. We have another number that we want to talk about. Nothing else? I can go through a few more if you
Sure, this table.
Sure. Got another one? All right, beautiful. Don't be shy, come on. Which number?
What number is that? At 29.
29. Not so bad.
So this one has one
There
of
we go.
your
Yes.
gut impaling
Yes.
handrails, also steel as well. And there's the other thing we noticed, there's no tactile warning on the surface to indicate that you're about to drop off down the stairs again. What else did we get? Oh, and that the handrail doesn't continue around the side, if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
What else? Did I miss anything?
And this one? No, I think you guys got them all really well. Excellent. Yeah, definitely that should have either turned down or turned the other one, like in the other image where we saw the handrail turning around the corner, so it doesn't impale you. And then, actually, you know what? There's, where's that other one? Oh, these ones are awesome. Does anybody have this picture? I just love these stairs. What do you think of those? Like, see this again, it's a landscape architect designing the stairs, which are pretty interesting. But God, if you're starting at the top and then you're going down following the line, so say if you start right at the top, right up to the left, and then you start heading down to the third one, you're at the bottom and you're going to miss it, right? If you follow that line. So, you know, it's nice to make them interesting and change space. Okay, perfect, sure.
We had these images,
Okay.
24 through 27, I think.
Okay, let's talk about 24. Yeah, this is my favorite. Go at this one, big time.
So there's a whole series of issues with this.
Yes.
There's no color change indicators on the nosings of the stairs, so on the rise and on the flat tops of the surface. There was also in none of those images any tactile surface indicators, they're warning indicators. We also thought that although it was creative to use the sculptural elements for seating nodes, they didn't function very well. They should have created proper seating areas with benches that had backings, railings, and proper kick space underneath them, both at the top, bottom, and in the middle. And they might have wanted to have included a third or a fourth one in there, a second set of landings, because that's a lot of stairs for people. As well on the sides, and we weren't sure if it was in this area where the cyclist ramp was, but if they were going to design that appropriately, it should have been a concrete ramp area with a different color indicating the ramp and then the appropriate spacing between the edge of the ramp and the railing on the side as well. The grade change in the rise between some of those concrete blocks is probably much larger than it should be. And they could have possibly separated those spaces out with handrails and included in the middle of those handrails maybe. But to ensure that the surface where the stairs are wide enough for people to get up and down and pass two people wide.
Thank you for that, because you look at the bottom left. It's hard to tell, but I had another image, the one I showed you where I put my notebook down there, and I swear to God, that bit on the right, when you get down to that bottom part, it's enough for just me to get through. That's how tight it is. And I'm like, we're spending all this money building this beautiful staircase. Edmonton has tons of marathons. There's all kinds of things that happen in the city. Why are we sticking all these concrete things in the middle just to have a big, wide set of stairs like you see in most European cities, right? And guess what? People can sit on wood. It's a hell of a lot more comfortable to sit on wood stairs than it is on concrete block, right? So I get the whole, water falling down the river thing. That's lovely. But the point is, it's got to be functional, right? And so there are other ways we could have designed it so that, yes, it created some interest along the staircase. We could play with color. We can do all kinds of different materials, whatever. But having the concrete blocks in the middle really limit the use of these stairs in the future. Because like I said, we could have marathon. Imagine a marathon of running up those stairs and have like hundreds of thousands of people just going up the stairs. That would be so cool. Well, now you can't because we have all these things in the way. So, and then there's so many, like the cycle wheel ramp. Yes, there is a cycle wheel ramp on the right-hand side, as you can see. That one is a little bit more generous than the one I showed you on the other stair where the lady was struggling. It's still not ideal. And we had this struggle in Auckland as well. And so in the ADG, you'll see a drawing that I stole from Auckland. It's in there, and this is how we solved it. So what we did was we separated the cycling portion of it and then put a handrail so that a cyclist, especially some cyclists who have difficulty when they're going up, they could actually use a handrail and then help push the bike up. And then a person with any impairments, they don't have to go on the side where the cycle wheel ramp is. They could stay on the side where the stairs. There's a drawing in there. I can't remember what page it is. But anyway, so there are solutions to that problem. So like I said, I'm a total cycling advocate. I love cycling, and I want to see these things on all our staircases in Edmonton. But if we're going to do them, we've got to do them right and make sure that we're not creating a negative impact on people with disabilities, because that's what a lot of the cycle wheel ramps currently do. Yes, ma'am. Oh, just hold it. Gary's coming around with the mic. 1 second. There we go.
I've used ones where they have little stops every so often, so that if you're pushing your bike up, you can stop and take a rest, and it won't fall backwards.
Yes.
Have you seen those? Is that
I haven't.
okay?
Where have you seen those? Because that sounds interesting. I've never seen those ones. Where?
I thought in Edmonton, actually.
Oh, really? Okay. Hey.
Yeah.
Right.
They only go about 10 steps. And
Right.
then there's a flat bit, and then
Yes. But see, those ones are great for cyclists, those ones you're talking about. Problem is, some of those cycle wheel ramps, the older ones in Edmonton, they're so wide that if you're a person who needs to walk up those stairs, it's very difficult because the handrail is way over here. So as you're trying to walk up, you're trying to pull yourself up the stair, but it's so far because you got a wide cycle wheel ramp, which is great because that's what I want. But the problem is you have to lean this way, and if you're weak on the one side, that's going to be hard for you to get up those stairs. So that's why I'm suggesting that if you're going to design a cycle wheel ramp, that you make sure that you design it so that you can provide a quality cycle wheel ramp for cyclists, but also not make negative impacts for persons who need the handrail. Because some people are weak in one arm or the other. So you got to give them that option to use the left or the right. So, yeah. Anything else? I think we're almost done. Well, thank you so much. I hope you guys... Oh, we got one more. Yes.
This is quite a new project. I'm just wondering, because the project is so new, how this happened instead of...
You're trying to get me in trouble, aren't you?
Like, there's room for a thorough review and a great piece of public architecture.
Okay, as you can tell, I tell the truth all the time. So what happened was when the project was first initiated, we were approached, well, not first initiated, sorry. We were first approached probably when the project was probably at 75, 80% design. The project team called myself, Heather, and Deanna that I mentioned right at the beginning, and we sat down and chatted with them of a whole list of issues, similar to what we did for Rogers Place, as I had indicated. They did accommodate a few of the things, but not many, because the process was so far down the track. The drawings were, almost like I said, 90% or whatever it was, 85% design, so it was too little, too late. They met with us on site in April of this year, and we walked the whole thing again, and we reiterated the same issues that we had provided the last time. And apparently there's a little bit of money available somewhere, and they said they were going to make some modifications. Hopefully, probably it's too late because winter's coming, but hopefully in the spring. So I'm hoping they're going to modify some of these things to make it a bit better. But it's another example of if they would have came to us right at the beginning, we wouldn't have any problems. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So that's it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys coming and participating. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you ever have any questions, my email address is on the presentation amongst my other colleagues and such. And feel free to send me an email. I don't have a phone. Okay, I'm probably one left in the world that doesn't have a phone. But send me an email. I get back to you. I swear to God, quick as I can. Yeah, just thanks again for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the session.
So in the audience, thanks very much for sharing your love and